On today's show, I'll be joined by Courtney Fallon of the Miami Heat Radio Network and the Bad Signal podcast with Courtney Fallon to talk about the Heat's offseason, Kevin Durant versus Donovan Mitchell, how she became a Heat fan despite growing up in Boston, and her love for Antoine Walker. We also get into her path from local radio in Boston to the NFL Network to now working for the Heat and hosting her own show. All that and a whole lot more. This is Good Times, a Locked On Heat interview show featuring conversations with interesting guests in sports, media, and entertainment. Make sure to subscribe and like the show on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. If you like this one, go back and check out Good Times episodes with Jorge Sedano, Brendan Tobin, and Joel Anthony. All right, now my conversation with Courtney Fallon. All right, really excited for this one. Joined by Courtney Fallon now of the Miami Heat Radio Network and the Bad Signal podcast. And Courtney, I was listening to a few of your shows, and you've mentioned on a couple different occasions that you're from Boston or worked in Boston, but you
Boston.
don't like the Celtics. You don't like the Celtics.
No, I'm from Boston. I'm born and raised in Boston. Born and raised a diehard Celtics fan, I guess you could say, until the age of 16 when I started to call into sports radio in Boston. Back in that day, they told me I was a woman. I wasn't allowed on air. I wasn't 18. FCC rules. They were lying. Don't worry. I'm probably 10 years older than a lot of people that are listening to the show. I'm 35. So, but I was very upset when they traded Antoine Walker. That was my hero. They traded him to the Miami Heat. And I was furious. I was furious at Danny Ainge, and they wouldn't allow me on air. Once I finally got on air, they told me, yeah, that's nice. And they hung up, and I wrote my college essay about it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I wrote my college essay. I got scholarship money to the University of Maryland. So listen, for every bad thing that happens to you, something good always comes from it.
Journalism school at Maryland?
I was a comm major.
Okay.
So journalism school right now, they more or less like canceled the broadcast journalism major. The Bonnie Bernstein and some of the greats and Boomer Esiason, all those guys that, graduated from Maryland earlier in the late 90s. They canceled that specific major. So they didn't, until I graduate, get an exorbitant amount of money from some sort of donor, alumni donor, to invest in the television studios and make sure that they could compete with guys like Syracuse. Because, I mean, like, if you're in my day and age here, every single person from broadcasting, whether it was in radio or television, was a Syracuse grad. So they wanted to somewhat compete. And I'm still a proud Maryland alum. And, I've come back. It took me a little bit because they were like, oh, you're not a Philip Merrill graduate. But, I'm outside of myself and Robert Klemko, we're probably the most notable names that came out of the school. So go Terps.
Go Terps. A good friend of mine actually went to Maryland. Connor Letourneau covers the Warriors over at the San Francisco Chronicle, and he's very big on the Terps too. But you mentioned the Syracuse guys. It's so funny. There's too many of them. There's too many of them, and they're really annoying about it. I think they're more annoying than the Northwestern guys about it, because it kind of feels like Syracuse is the little brother of Northwestern, though they would never say that. I went to UCF. They have a journalism program, but they don't have like a school of journalism. It's not like named after anybody cool or anything like that. But we're doing our best. Go Knights. You mentioned a couple things there that I want to follow up on. First of all, that you were calling into radio shows, which is sort of a relic now. That's not a thing unless you're, I guess, Paul Feinbaum or Jim Rome that you do anymore. So that was just interesting that your career kind of that was your motivation, was something that like barely even exists anymore. And it's just so funny to think about how the industry has changed that you're in.
Yeah. This is going to sound weird, and I'm not trying to like go down like a whole life career path, but when I was 10 years old, I had this fascination with listening to myself on the radio. So I would call into the hip hop station. They would take calls at 10 o'clock, and I loved Jim and 94.5 up there. And so I used to call in and say something funny to try to get on their little like montage for the most requested song of the night. And then I would run back upstairs and I would hit record on my tape recorder of my boombox, and I would record my voice. So I think I always had some little radio in me. I got my start in radio. I was the first female voice at the Sports Hub, which is basically taken over for EI up there in Boston. My first internship in the business was at SiriusXM NFL Radio. Myself and John Jastrzemski, if you guys know about, he's huge with the Ringer. He was big with WFAN. We were both in the same intern class. So radio is always been It's always been my ace in the hole. Even though I
Yeah.
wanted to, I had grand plans to get back into television. It was once that time that I kind of had to take a step back and had to take a breather. After I left NFL Network, I was like, you know what? Um, let's get into this podcast and let's get into the radio stuff. And it almost felt like I was flying. It was like
Yeah.
I was like, wow, this is really ingrained in everything that I love, even though I talk too fast. So sorry
I'm
for
working
everyone.
on the
No,
same
this is
thing.
not sped up. I promise. It's just how my brain works.
I literally have 2 notes, like, kind of right by my computer here. It says, "Like," with a cross out, don't say "like" in between, and, "slow down" sometimes. You just gotta slow down. I wanna talk about the Celtics thing, though, because that's so interesting. You end up in Miami, and now the Heat, well, not now, but the Heat just played the Celtics in the conference finals.
Mm.
Just curious, obviously, you're rooting for the Heat at that point, but then the Celtics win. They go to the NBA finals. Are you rooting for, against the Celtics? I'm sure you have friends and family that just really wanted the Celtics to win that. Like, where are you emotionally during the NBA finals at that point, considering how hard it was, to see Game 7 end the way that it did, I'm sure.
I just find this so funny. People make so many assumptions, and I get texts from people that I've just been jarring at, including close family, including my brothers, including my mother, who would hang up and I said, "Go Heat." She usually would be all about it. Her father, my grandfather, who I never knew because he died very young, but I mean, he was a huge Celtics fan throughout the 60s, 70s, 80s. So, I mean, like her roots for the Celtics ran very deep. That was her father's team. But yeah, a text from my cousin. "Oh, I'm so sorry about the game. At least you have a good team to root for in the finals." I was like, "Think I'm rooting for the Celtics? You are funny because why do I have to root for the Celtics? I might be from Boston. I kind of disengaged from that team at a very young age, 16, 17 years old. Of course, like when you go back to Boston, you have to talk NBA, but I was a Patriot supporter. The NFL was my sport, and I just never fully believed in Danny Ainge. Danny Ainge to me, he betrayed me at a very young age. I never really bought into. They called them the Green Teamers up in Boston. They are crazy. And for the many years that they just couldn't get things right, they're just talking about analytics and this, and they're just like this group of fans that are crazy.
Yeah.
And listen, I applaud. Everyone wanted to rip that team apart in January, including Kendrick Perkins. So applaud Jason Tatum, applaud Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart for getting things together. I was actually a huge supporter of Marcus Smart getting that massive, it was a $75 million contract. People were up in arms. You go back to Boston a year ago, you replay that tape, they were furious. They were like, "Why the hell are you giving this money?" And now all of a sudden in the Celtics bio, it says Marcus Smart, heart and soul of the Celtics. How soon they forget. It's "what have you done for me lately" up there. And I just, Heat culture to me, my first real big job 10 years ago. This is crazy. I was the weekend sports anchor with Joe Rose. If you guys all watched
Oh, yeah.
Sports Final with Joe Rose, that was me. I was blonde. It was a little heavier set back then, back in the day. But it was a time in my life. I covered the Dolphins bullying scandal with Richie Incognito and Jonathan Martin. I covered Jose Fernandez. I had one of his first interviews with Jose Fernandez about how he defected from Cuba. And the best and most important part was that I got to cover the 2013 NBA champions, Ray Allen, The Shot, Dwayne Wade, LeBron James, and the access back then, Wes, it was unbelievable. I
Yeah.
was all about my Instagram, taking pictures, but really just in a storytelling sense. And I had a lot of stories that went national, like Baby Birdman, and we
Right.
interviewed Bebe Villete, if anyone remembers Bebe Villete, and
Oh, yeah.
oh, I had the time of my life, and I really equated the professionalism of the Miami Heat organization to much like what they do in New England. It's very serious, very cut and dry. And you walk into that building, and might not have a suit and tie, but you tighten that suit and tie, and you go to work. And I felt that same vibe when I walked back in to the arena earlier this year when I got the job with Miami Heat Radio and the assistants at everything I'm doing with Jason Jackson and all the broadcast partners. And um, I'm just super grateful to be here. This is my happy place.
I'm glad you bring that up because it was one of the things I had that I wanted to talk to you about because you've had such a variety of roles, in this industry now. I sort of wonder what about working for the Miami Heat stands out as an organization? Is it sort of the professionalism? I mean, what is it that stands out just from where being a media person and having to work for a team like that?
I think I had wandering eyes. I lived back in Boston for
Mhm.
the 2 years of COVID.
Yeah.
Not really by choice, but I had happened to kind of run out of work in LA, and so I moved home. I started working for WEI. Then COVID hit, and all of that mess unfolded. As we all know, it kind of changed the landscape and the world of what we were doing, and it started my own show. But even during that NBA Eastern Conference Finals during the bubble, I had my eyes on what Pat Riley was doing. I just was like, the Celtics might be good, but man, he's not going to stop. He's really, putting his lead foot to the ground. He's continuing to build. He picked up Jimmy Butler. I just was wildly intrigued by everything that was going on down here still. And I was like, man, I even said it back there. I was like, Pat knows what he's doing. He's building something.
Mhm.
And when the opportunity came, really on a whim, it was like the middle of September, and I heard that they had made changes to the radio broadcast, and Mike Inglis, the great Mike Inglis, is retiring. And I texted Jackson. I said, "Is there any space on the radio on the television broadcast or anything? Are they making changes? There must be a move." And he said, "We'll just wait and see." So we kind of went from there and found a place for myself, more or less like on the beginner's level. But I didn't care. It didn't matter about the money. It did not matter about anything else. I wanted to be in the building.
Yeah.
Period. I wanted to be back with my people. I wanted to be back covering an Eric Spoelstra team. Just again, the professionalism from there all the way to the PR staff, Tim Donovan and Rob and Michael Lissack and everything that this whole organization stands for. I wanted to be a part of it, and there was nothing else I really wanted to do. I mean, the NFL to me right now, it's just kind of a mismatch of, hey, they're not really hiring on networks, but they're hiring on DraftKings and this and and
Right.
this network, and I just, man, I just want some stability and a drive and a goal and somewhere that I could climb. And I knew that if I could kick my foot through the door here, that I would climb, and I would do anything to make sure that my skills were beneficial to what was happening with the team. And I mean, and that's really just what it is now. It's, me knocking on doors and saying, "Hi, I'm Courtney. How are you? This is might be my experience in the past, but this is where I work and this is who I represent, and how can I help you?"
Mhm.
So um it's a very rewarding job, and I don't mind working hard. I don't mind those 12, 14-hour days. I actually embrace them. So
Yeah. I want to circle back on the Danny Ainge stuff, but not before I have to at least make a comment on the fact that you followed Antoine Walker, and that was your dude. And I think that's, first of all, that's ahead of your time, because I feel like kids these days will follow players and not teams. Like they'll follow LeBron in whatever jersey he goes to. And you were like, you know what, I'm an Antoine Walker fan. If he's not playing for the Celtics, I'm rooting for the Heat now. If you're the president of the Antoine Walker fan club, then I'll be vice president, because I remember when he got traded to Miami, whenever that was, 2004,
four,
2005. Yeah. I was like,
three,
oh
four.
yeah, I was all in on this guy. I was all in on
Yeah.
this guy. So I'll be vice president of the fan club. But to circle back to the Danny Ainge thing, it's an interesting kind of period we're in, because obviously the Heat are in these Donovan Mitchell rumors, and the thing that I think people are aware of but not really talking a whole lot about is the fact that if Donovan Mitchell were to end up in Miami, that would first require a phone call between Pat Riley and Danny Ainge and some sort of negotiation. What do you think that phone call goes like? Because we know the history between those two. I'm not going to ask you for predictions. I'm not into that kind of stuff, but
No.
just the general tenor of that conversation, considering the history between those two guys.
I think I could imagine Pat Riley picking up the phone and saying something so stern and so profound that Danny is just rendered speechless. He
There
just
we go.
says, oh, he gets that instant scare. And then part of him in the veil that he has, or whatever hatred that he has towards Pat Riley, kind of slowly dissipates. But then he kind of's like, wait, I have to represent who I am and our past. So, now I'm gonna show him the tough nuts.
Right.
Um, Listen, no one knows. I don't know when that started, but I keep telling people, I said I hated Danny Ainge before, way before Pat Riley did. I'm pretty sure. Probably not, because I'm sure that if you asked Pat, he would go back to some intricate story
Right.
about playing days and He reminds me of this. Anything that reminds me of Bill Belichick and the way that things. I mean, I just, listen, guys. I'm sorry. I am a Patriots fan, but like the way that Bill can just like go on a tangent and talk about history. I just think that is so few and far between of
Mhm.
what we embrace in today's day and age. And all these kids these days talking about listen, you didn't watch enough Michael Jordan highlights to say that you could cook him on the field, on
Right.
the court, John Moran. Anyways, um, I think that relationships are important. I think that they are imperative in terms of transactions between different personnel and different teams. I think at this point, I know I'm not going to speculate. Listen, I'm a hardcore journalist. I'm not going to speculate certain things, but I've read certain things and rumors that the Heat are hunting for side deals to collect draft picks, that they want a first for Duncan. And I think that when all is said and done, that Pat Riley will approach Danny Ainge, and he will give him the best deal that he can.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of that will be persuaded by Dwayne Wade, who has a heavy hand in everything with the Utah Jazz. I think that he wants things to happen. So does he want to create a rift between his, one of his business partners and himself as head of the Jazz? Because if he goes to the New York Knicks, what's going to happen? What is happening there? They're not going to trade RJ Barrett.
Right.
What are the pieces going to happen there? Everyone's going to go rah, go Knicks, and they're going to go and it's going to accumulate to a first round exit. It's not going to benefit the player. It's not going to benefit them. I mean, if they're really looking to break and rebuild, the perfect fit is with the Miami Heat, and they know that.
Yeah. So, I mean, Heat fans these days, it kind of feels like, Twilight fans at this point. You're either Team Donovan or Team Kevin at this point. Are you Team
I'm
Donovan or
team
Team
both.
Kevin?
I'm
Team both.
team both. However, I'm realistic. And I think
Yeah.
that Sean Marks is lost his mind. Four first round picks. I know that the haul that they got, the Jazz, for Rudy Gobert was extraordinary. It was something like 1-2 first round picks, and this was before they had made up various different trades. We got to be realistic here. You also have to take into consideration, and maybe I haven't been covering this league not long enough, but you have to take into consideration what is best for the player as well. What is best for the players and the partners involved, because you have Kevin Durant, you have Rich Kleiman that have to agree in all of these deals, and you don't want to leave even more sour than you were before. Kevin, albeit Draymond Green is probably one of the most vocal players in the NBA right now. I mean, Kevin is obsessed with social media, regardless of what he thinks. I mean, he watches every single talk show, every headline. He's up there, and you don't want to upset him in certain ways like that. So I just the realistic person inside of me says that Donovan Mitchell will be the easier play. I mean, it could be easier said than done than that, but I'm not giving up the pieces. And Kevin Durant doesn't want to give up the pieces. He said he wants to play next to Bam Adebayo. That's the Twin Tower, effect that we're going to be playing with versus, the Timberwolves that just created the new NBA Twin Towers. It's going to be Bam, it's going to be KD, it's Jimmy Butler, and whether or not it's Kyle Lowry, then it's Kyle Lowry. But he says that he wants to play with Kyle. Kyle has accepted Pat's challenge. Incredibly skinny. I mean, like, in a good way. Thin, agile. Looks like he's just revamped, re-ready for basketball season. So, and then you get on the other side, you get Tyler Herro talking about his Madden rating the other day. He was like, I'm an 84 right now. I'm going to make it an 89.
Yeah.
So it's almost like everyone and all these pieces, it benefits Pat in a sense that the players have heeded his call. They've bought into the system. They've bought into the things that he said, the challenges that he's made. And we will see how it goes. I think, again, realistic me says that Donovan Mitchell will be the perfect fit. But, Kevin Durant is one of the top 3 greatest players in the world. Yeah. And why not have him in his prime? But I'm not trading a guy like Bam Adebayo to trade 9 years. We're here for we're here for a long time, not a good time.
Right.
Drake would say.
Yeah.
I'm not giving up age, and I'm not giving up a guy like Bam.
I'm with you. I don't.
Pat Riley, he doesn't owe anything to this team He owes nothing to this Heat roster except for Jimmy Butler. Nothing.
Yeah.
Remember that.
Yeah. I mean, this is what I keep going back to when we talk about what should the Heat include Bam to get KD or Mitchell or superstar XYZ. I just keep coming back. You're not making that trade to get Kevin Durant. You're not getting that. You're not making that trade to get Donovan Mitchell. You're making that trade to win a championship. And does a team with Kevin Durant, Jimmy Butler, and not Bam Adebayo, is that team good enough to win a championship? I don't know the answer to that, but that's sort of the calculus that Pat Riley is making, where I think a lot of fans may get stuck on the name Kevin Durant, Donovan Mitchell's end of formula. That's not the end of the formula. It has to go,
Yeah.
okay, what does the team look like if we make that trade? And can we build a legitimate title contender around that? And if it does cost young pieces in the future, whether it's draft picks or whatever, do we think we have a legitimate chance in this whatever 2 or 3 year window where it's worth
Yes.
it? And it's all risk reward. I mean, that's not breaking news, but that's sort of what it is. I don't know. I don't. You mentioned KD and like how teams have been sort of reluctant to trade for him, and I get it. I was asked earlier today, like, you know, why is he so unhappy in Brooklyn? And I just go back. I'm like, I don't know why he was so unhappy in Oklahoma. I don't know why he was so unhappy in Golden State. And I don't know why. I kind of understand why he's unhappy in Brooklyn, but I'm not going to pretend to be in his head. I don't know. He just always seems very supremely unhappy wherever he goes. And if you're the Heat, you have to think about that too. Can we make this guy happy? Because I don't know if anybody knows the answer to that. Whereas Donovan Mitchell is 25, he's young. I don't mean any offense to Salt Lake City. My boss is based out of Salt Lake City, so if you're listening, I love Salt Lake City. But
Hey, boss, what's
uh,
up? I love Park City. Park City is the best. I've
it
gone to
is.
Sundance. It's the best.
But if you're Donovan Mitchell and it's New York or Miami versus Salt Lake City, you might just be a little bit happier. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah. I think a lot of it too has to do with you have to look at it. I know that you want to separate this like oil and water. You want to look at Kevin Durant as an entity as a basketball player, but you also have to take into consideration he doesn't have an agent, and Rich Kleiman is his business partner. I mean, Kevin Durant could potentially, Wes, become the next billionaire. You know, I mean, with just all of the investments that he has made, and I mean, he's so intelligent in placing his money, watching it grow. He's built a corporation basically out of Boardroom, which is the the podcast partner and everything that he has involved with all the business aspects,
Yeah.
everything that goes along with the KD brand, the shoe companies, and all of that stuff. What is it down here that he wants to enjoy so much? Is it the tech boom? Is it the NFTs? Is it the Art Basel? Is it there's something that's very unique and appealing? Okay, Siri, sorry. Siri's trying to talk.
Siri's got
What
opinions on
is it?
KD.
She said that's what I figured. Okay, thanks, Siri. I appreciate it. Thanks. Good night. I mean, like it.
We got 3 people on the pod now.
Okay. All right. Now we got a spirit in the room, like
Yeah,
okay.
that's the
So
spirit of
anyway,
Danny Ainge.
yeah, the spirit of Danny is just the haunting all like the crazy dreams I have of haunting me of my all my terrible high school friends that I had. I think that there is a business opportunity and a relationship that he sees down here, much like New York, and maybe he's just like single girl going through all the dating scene in New York City, and now
Yeah.
he just wants to move to Miami and kind of tap into that financial base. And there's a lot of very, very wealthy people down here. So
Yeah.
why doesn't he want to go to the Dallas Mavericks?
Mm.
Like there's plenty of money there. You could go with Mark Cuban. I mean, like I kind of part of me, I mean, again, this is just kind of like my brain working as to like why he would be unhappy there. I think that there is a large business opportunity that he can have down here.
Mhm. It
That's
makes sense.
yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents.
Yeah. That tech thing you said is really interesting, and it's not something that I thought about because part of the reason he wanted to go to the Bay Area was to get sort of involved in that scene. You're absolutely right. I mean, it's not just obviously it's very loud that the fact that the Heat went from American Airlines to FTX and everybody associates crypto with Miami now. It's one of the crypto places, but it's also one of the tech places. And you're right. That's something that him and Rich Kleiman have been very, they've been sort of experts at that in relative to other NBA players. So that's something worth thinking about. I want to shift gears a little bit to your podcast, Bad Signal again. Recent interviews, just off the top right here. You had Sarah Spain on recently, Stephen A. Smith, Ryan Russillo. What is it about media people that you enjoy? viewing them or talking with them about?
I think my podcast, the best thing about my show, and whether or not I kind of pepper in an interview with one of my co-hosts, Steve Armato, and we talk some sports betting, and we'll bring some various different characters on there. I feel like there is just kind of like this vibe of us drinking beer and sitting at the table and just shooting the stuff about sports, and all of us. There's really just like a very laid back, enthusiastic style that my podcast brings that will have everyone kind of laughing and then being like, oh, that's interesting, and really enthralled and listening to it. And that's the bottom line of like when you meet me and we sit down, whether we're in an event or whether I talk to you before the Heat game, it's a very friendly conversation that we all want to enjoy about sports. It should not be taken so seriously, and everything that's going on in the world is really crazy. And but I feel like everyone really takes a step back and really enjoys sports in general. It takes their mind off of everything that they have going on in their lives. And I love my media friends. I mean, all of these people that I've had on my podcast, as you mentioned, Sarah Spain, Stephen A. Smith, Ryan Russillo, Antoine Walker actually was a guest of my show on my podcast. If you kind of want to go real back, we have had Rob Ninkovich. I mean, so many names. I really can't like every name's Adam Schefter has come on my podcast. I have had appearances from just about every single network. Brian Baldinger was on recently. I'm dropping an episode later today to preview the NFC South. I love really reconnecting with my media friends. And these are relationships that I've forged throughout the years. And people are like, wow, look at all these guests and all that stuff. But like, it's legitimately the networking in me that I have stepped out of my comfort zone and I have walked up to people, whether it was 10 years ago or whether it was 5 years ago. Louis Riddick, who I haven't even met. He made like a podcast talking about Bill Belichick and free agency last year that went viral. It was on all the talk shows. I've never met him in person, but we have forged a relationship and talking about certain insider stuff. That is what this business is all about. Yeah. It is about, being true to yourself, true integrity, and just, having like a welcoming heart and having them on your show to talk sports. I don't know when it appears. And trust me, it's not easy. It's not always easy. Rich Kleiman, for example, refuses almost. I mean, I'm not saying refuses to come on my show, but he's a hard fish to catch, and kind of thinks it's funny that I'm asking him. And I'm like, okay, if you're too cool for school, then you can hit the door. So that's just really the vibe that we bring. And I welcome you guys to all listen to the Bad Signal podcast with Courtney Fallon. And Wes, I look forward to having you on my show as well.
That'd be great. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's so funny you mentioned the fact that like Louis Riddick, you have him on the show, you've never met him in person.
Never met him in person.
That's sort of what this is now. And I just got back from Summer League in Las Vegas, and there's just so many people that NBA people that you meet on Twitter, and people who I've had on Locked On Heat who I literally would just like run into in the hallway at Thomas and Mack Center. And it's like, oh my God, that's how tall you are. That's what you look like in person. Like, it's just sort of funny that that's sort of the new normal in media, because we all interact so much on Twitter and on podcasts and things like this. If you have a few, go ahead.
No, I just want to say, like, that's for everyone that's listening to this and wants to know, like, how do you get in the business? I started a Twitter account right when Twitter started in 2009 when I graduated college. And I came home and I was a Red Sox blogger. I was the Sox Fox, but I would write on a separate website. But I just had my name, Fallon87, and I would live tweet Red Sox games, and would connect and comment on various different Boston Globe sports writers and, and national writers. And they knew my name by my comments. So when I finally met them in person, it instantly connected. They knew exactly who I was. So don't be afraid to try. I think I saw something like ASAP Rocky was saying, he's like, why are we making fun of people for trying to do something? You should never be afraid to not try. Who's judging you? As long as you keep clean, always keep all that personal business to yourself and your private stories and all that, friends, but put yourself out there. If you have a comment, become friends, forge real internet friends, relationships. You never know if you're afraid to like post that one video and say, hey, I think the Heat are going to get Donovan Mitchell, and this is why, because I think that they're going to make a trade partner with the Dallas Mavericks, and they're going to trade Kyle Lowry, like all this stuff. If you wanted to make a video of that, put it out there. You never know who is watching, because there have been various different times where I've hesitated about posting a video or, cutting a video, but when I actually do, it's led to jobs. It's led to
Right.
relationships. People are watching and people are seeing. So don't be afraid to try.
I'm with you. And don't be afraid to say hi or reach out and say, "Hey, loved your show, love that column, love that podcast, love that article," whatever it was, because people really do appreciate that. I'm glad that you dropped both Drake and ASAP Rocky references on this show. It sounds like the girl who used to call into hip hop radio shows at 10 o'clock at night.
I'm going to the Kendrick Lamar concert in Austin, Texas tomorrow.
That's awesome. I
Yeah,
was
I
just
know.
watching actually clips of the first one, I guess last night in Oklahoma City, and it looked amazing. So, Kendrick Lamar, I don't know if you could see it. There he is.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah.
Listen, you know why I love Kendrick Lamar? I mean, he is the new age. I mean, West Coast rap,
Yeah.
just the flavor and everything. And he's also born in 1987. So great year
There
to
you
be
go.
born.
If you have a couple more minutes, I want to take you to the hot take corner. All right.
Oh.
I've got just a couple of phrases that I want to throw your way. Kind of free association. I'm not asking you questions. I'm just sort of throwing phrases your way, and you just take it however you want. Just give me your hottest take. Wherever you want to go, wherever you want to take it, you can take it. NBA media versus NFL media coverage.
I think NBA media it's just a completely different culture. It's a completely different culture. It's much more relaxed, free fare. I think that the audience with the NBA is much greater, global. So you have to incorporate that. So there's more outlets. It's almost like the web is spun greater. The NFL media, I've been there, I've done that. It's a very close-knit circle. So that's what I would just say. It's a lot more tight-lipped, and it's a lot more uptight. Tight-lipped, uptight. The NBA media, I mean, I'm giving a hat tip to, it's the girls like Taylor Rooks and the various different female reporters, Ross Gold, Wunde and Chinny. I can't pronounce her last name. I'm sorry, but she, and all those girls, and they're all about talking their talk and walking their walk, and it means dressing in hot outfits and and getting various different sponsorships and this, and really putting their content out there. It's just it's a different vibe. It's just a completely different vibe than the NFL, which is run by the Shield and Roger Goodell, and everyone's afraid of getting axed if you do something wrong. So
you tweeted this morning that you beat your coach in tennis. Tennis advice. Hot take on tennis advice.
Hydrate. Make sure that you breathe. I think that's the biggest thing for me when I started playing again, was that I was out of breath for like after 10 minutes because I'm forgetting to breathe, stroke in, out, like make sure that breathing is the biggest thing. I would say just really find a good coach. Find someone that you can hit with that can like really just like minimize your time on the court and make you so much better, because I connected with someone that has a fantastic tennis coach. And I mean, I'm ready to compete in the fall. Like I'm not kidding. Like I'm ready. And I took about a month and a half off. I went back home to Boston. I didn't bring my racket. I didn't play for a little bit. So today was my first day back and I felt stronger than ever. So yeah.
In the summer heat in South Florida.
Oh yeah, no,
that's no joke.
That's And then they were dying. They were like, "Oh my God, like you need water." And I was like, "No, I just last couple of weeks have just been taking really good care of myself and, making sure mentally, physically that I'm at the top of my game." I had some health issues at the end of June, nothing too serious, like allergy related, but it was, it got a little serious. So, I was like, you know what, like I really need to take care of myself. I need to be the best version of myself. And, when you do that, you feel good. And then you get good podcasts when you go on the Locked On Heat podcast.
Look good, feel good. All right, last two. Paul Pierce.
I hate him.
Okay.
Nope. I hate him. I can't. He's been disengaged as no. He big times me when I was working at NBC. This was heartbreaking, actually. So I used to scalp tickets when I was a freshman in high school and go to the Celtics playoff games when they would play Eric Snow and Jason Kidd and the Nets.
Yeah.
One of those first round. And I like dragged one of my friends from my soccer team and we sat in the balcony. And I can remember I scalped these tickets and in Boston, Paul Pierce for 3. And like he hit a 3 and I was like, yeah. And there is a guy that's sitting next to me reading a newspaper with his glasses. And I knocked his glasses off when I was cheering in the 300 level. And he's freaking out. He drops his newspaper. He's like, what the bleep? I can't. And I'm like, bro, don't bring your newspaper to a playoff game, homeboy. Right. That was my guy. It was Pierce and Antoine. And although I didn't cover, I had left before I like actually covered the Celtics, at least for like local news or anything. I did a bunch of stand-ups and stuff, like minimal stuff, but I didn't cover the team. So this was really more or less like kind of like my first interaction with Paul. And it was when he was traded to Brooklyn with Kevin, and they were just like running into an absolute buzzsaw. It was when the Heat lost for the second time in 2014 to the Spurs in the finals, but they knew they were going to get killed. And I went up to Paul and we all like back in the day, we had media scrums and, the media scrum and all the lights turned on, and I'm in my thing and all the ESPN, I think they were like going live on ESPN. And I said, hey, so, just given everything that all the competition you've had with LeBron over the years, how does it feel to, compete with him in his house? He's like, I'm sorry, what did you say? And I was like, just given your rivalry with LeBron James, how do you approach this? I'm right. Sorry. I have no idea what you're saying. And it got to the point where I started like shaking. And meanwhile, I'm face to face with him, my hero growing up. And he is looking at me dead in the face to embarrass me. Because I asked Ray Allen, by the way, happy birthday, Ray Allen, today. I told Ray how it happened after. And he was like, oh, you cannot. He goes, the biggest sin you could ever do is ask Paul Pierce about LeBron James, because there is no one he hates more in life than LeBron James. And he embarrassed me like more than anything. And I had to, and Jason Jackson, who was working for Fox Sports and Bally's at the time, who, is now my boss, but a great friend of mine. And he was like, I was about to jump in and save you. He was like, that was not right. That was not right. So, that's the end of that story. But, Paul's got a great opinion. Paul's got a big mouth. He and Doc Rivers have the same birthday. So if you can kind of equate that player to coach, that's kind of the way those levers work.
I appreciate you putting yourself out there with the Paul Pierce story. I did not expect that when I just wrote down his.
He broke. I mean, listen, you got to say like that was he was one of my heroes. My brother, when I was 9 or 10 years old. So I get my love for sports from my oldest brother. He's 8 years older than me. So, I mean, he used to have me sit there and be like, who are the starting players for the Patriots? Drew Bledsoe and Kevin Falk and this, and so he would put this in front. I never knew what he was talking about, but he threw down the front cover of the Kentucky when Kentucky won the national championship with Antoine Walker, and he was like, looked, and he goes, you see this, Courtney? You see him? He's going to change the Celtics franchise forever. So, I mean, he had me buying it with Paul. He had me buying it with Antoine at a very young age. So something like that, it's my one story. Like, don't meet your heroes because it hurt. It was not nice.
I feel like I owe it to you to tell you. So I met Dwayne Wade when I was sort of a beginning reporter, and obviously that was my hero growing up.
Oh,
and my story has a happier ending than your story, but I didn't realize I was just starting out. I didn't know that in the NBA there is a rule that players don't have to talk if they don't play because of injury.
Yeah.
And so I found, but Dwayne Wade was hanging out. They were playing. They were playing Sacramento at the time or whatever, and Dwayne Wade was in the locker room after the game, and he didn't play. And I walked up to him because nobody was talking to him. I was like, oh my God, it's Dwayne Wade. Nobody's talking to him, obviously, because every other reporter knows the rule except for me. And so I just go up to Dwayne Wade and I'm just like, okay, all right, I'm psyching myself up. I'm going to go talk to him. I'm going to go talk to D Wade. I'm going to go talk to him. And I go up and I'm like, hey, Dwayne, I think I said Dwayne. I don't remember. But I was like, hey, do you have a couple minutes to talk? And he kind of looks at me and goes, nah. And I go, sick.
Okay.
All right, cool. Cool. And then I walked away. And then one of the Heat PR guys comes up to me and he was like, dude, what are you doing? He doesn't have to talk. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize that was a rule. And they're like,
Did he
idiot. And I
apologize
was
to
like,
you?
okay, cool. Fast forward a couple years later, I'm back in Miami at this point. I had been credentialed to cover the Heat game in Miami. And then I go up and Dwayne Wade is there and he obviously played. And there was a huge scrum in the locker room as it was in the old days, talking to Dwayne Wade, blah, blah, blah. And then I just pull him aside. I don't even remember what I asked him. I just sort of blacked out, but I just asked him a couple questions off to the
That's the
side.
best way to
And he
go.
was super nice and he was super generous with his time. And I could have asked him more questions if I had more and I didn't. I made up questions. I just wanted to have an excuse to talk to him one-on-one, and I did, and that's how that worked out. So
That's great. That's great.
yeah.
See, the girl, if you were a girl, you'd be like, "Hey, so like the last time that I talked to you, I really like messed up, and I'm sorry, and like
I'm sorry.
like I
And he
watched
was
you
like,
my whole
I
life."
don't remember that.
Yeah, I know, but you blacked out, so
Right.
that's
Maybe I did say that. I don't know.
all bets are off. All bets are off.
All right, last thing, and then I'll get you out of here, and I appreciate the
Yeah.
time here. Pepas.
Yes, best
There
song
we
ever.
go. Best song ever. Perfect.
Oh,
Courtney Fallon, thank you so much for the time here. You could find her Bad Signal podcast wherever you get podcasts, Bad Signal with Courtney Fallon, and of course, the Miami Heat Radio Network. Courtney, thanks so much. This was fun.
thank you so much for having me.